All right. Looks like
Okay.
we are live. I am here with Allison, and it's going to be we're going to be talking about our favorite albums from 1979. And I'm going to let Allison start off with her
Good evening.
choices. And
Hi, everybody. Can I tell everybody a little bit about myself first?
of course, please
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Well, my name's Alison Raymond, and I live in the south of England. I live in a place just outside a place called Basingstoke in a farm cottage, and that's what you see around me at the moment. And I was very flattered when Ron invited me along to take part in this show today. Just to tell you a little bit about what I do, more or less, is in my spare time. It's more of a hobby, but I do write for. I'm a contributor to Prog magazine in the UK. I write gig reviews and I do interviews, which I enjoy very much. So I've been a prog fan now for probably over 50 years. So that's just to set the scene. And in 1979, I was 21. So it was quite a formative year for me. And Ron, if you don't mind, I'm going to introduce my first pick of that year and what was probably
Of
my
course.
album of the year. And my album of the year is Images at Twilight by Saga. And I remember the first time, it's one of those occasions where I remember exactly what I was doing when I first heard this album. I was I was working on a local newspaper and I had this album sat in front of me for about 2 weeks waiting to be reviewed. And I was umming and ahhing. I thought, I don't know anything about this band, but I thought I will finally play this album. And I was at a boyfriend's house doing the washing up and I played it. And it was one of those moments where I literally nearly dropped everything in the sink because from the moment I heard It's Time, this to me was one of the most brilliantly tight, majestic, melodic, powerful albums I'd heard for a very, very long time. The whole mix and the fact that they were a Canadian band, so there was more than one good band apart from Saga and Rush in Canada, really made it even more special. So this album is a very special one to me. It was their second album, I believe, after their debut album, and they went on to make Silent Night afterwards, which was another fantastic album.
Right. Yeah, I got into them more into the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks to my good friend. He says you got to check out this band.
Yeah.
You know, he says I know your tastes. He said this is right up your alley. You're gonna just love it. So when I got them, uh, he says go in chronological order. I knew of the band because of On the Loose, their video. It was
Mm.
constantly played on MTV, so I knew that. But he says no, start from the beginning. He says, and you'll see how good of a band these guys are. And just I kind of wish I had that moment when I was when it came out.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, '79, I was 13, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I would have appreciated it as much. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's a they're a great band, and like you said, actually they're the third successful Canadian band. Because you got
Rush.
Rush, Triumph, and Saga.
Uh-huh.
I mean those.
Yeah.
Uh, but Saga seemed to be more um, popular everywhere except United States.
And the United Kingdom as well, because they haven't toured here since I believe the late 90s because they just cannot find an audience over here.
And it's a shame because
It is.
I
They're
mean
because
they would
they're spectacular live. I did have the good fortune to see them play in the UK back in 1981 when they came over here. And it was one of the few occasions that they did play. I think they played the Hammersmith Odeon the following year. But they just didn't seem to find an audience over here. And I think there was one gig, and I think not many people turned up, and there was water coming through the roof. And I think that kind of deterred them from coming back. But they are huge in Europe. I mean, they're always touring Scandinavia and Germany. And it's just such a tragedy that they could never really get a foothold over here.
right, right. Yeah, it's almost like in a way, they're kind of like for the U.S. and UK, kind of like a cult band.
Yeah, yeah, I guess, which is makes it even more of a pity because I think they're a very, very accessible band. Their
Oh
songs
yeah,
very, very structured, and you've had got songs like "Don't Be Late," which is like their theme song, and it's just
right.
so accessible. And their stage shows are terrific. I mean, Michael Sadler is such a fantastic frontman. I mean, he still looks absolutely magnificent.
And it sounds great still. I mean,
Beautiful, brilliant
usually
voice.
usually singers uh, from the 70s and 80s, they
Yeah,
for the most part they kind of lose their voice. I mean, they can't
yeah,
hit the higher registers, but from the videos I've seen, he still can. So
yeah,
it's
yeah. But yeah, but that was really my introduction to them, and I had the pleasure of meeting them when they came over here to record Worlds Apart. So
oh
I made their acquaintance, and I think started their British fan club over here as well at one stage, but it never worked out. But I'm still in touch with them, and it's just great to see that they're still doing well.
oh yes. All right.
Over
Well,
to you.
my first one is Rainbow Down to Earth.
Wonderful.
I got into them in the mid 80s when I got into my hard rock metal phase. And I really like the fact that while Graham Bonnet is no Ronnie James Dio, but
Mm-hmm.
he follows in that the vein because I was just
Yes.
listening to it again, and I can hear on some songs I could actually hear it if Dio sang them, but I
Mm-hmm.
know the backstory is basically Richard Blackmore wanted to go a little more accessible, and Ronnie didn't want to. He wanted to stay in the more mystical realm of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think they got a great replacement with Graham Bonnet. I mean, he can hit those high notes, but he has a very gruff sounding voice,
Yeah,
which,
yeah, yeah.
and, and then of course, the two hits from it, All Night Long and Since You've Been Gone, those ones definitely it wouldn't Dio wouldn't sing those at all. I don't,
Mm,
but they Lost in Hollywood is a good one, and this kind of put me onto the Rainbow radar. So I went back and I got the earlier ones and then the later ones with Joe Lynn Turner, and it was a great rock band.
mm,
I mean,
mm.
I never seen them live. I never seen any Deep Purple live, with Richie. I never saw that. I mean, I think I would when they did their revival in the '80s. That would have been kind of cool. But
Mm.
at that point, I really wasn't into going to concerts. Um, but that's my first choice.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I've got, I've got
it's
to,
a
I've got to tell you that I did actually see Rainbow live. I saw them. It must have been round about this time, because Graham Bonnet was actually the singer, and I saw them at a place called the Bingley Hall in Staffordshire, which is quite away from where I was. And this hall was sort of like a giant cattle shed. It was an extraordinary place, but it was one of the big venues in the UK round about that time. And I remember that the support act was an Australian band called Rose Tattoo. I don't know if you remember them at all. I heard them.
no.
Rose Tattoo? No. And it was a fantastic night. I mean, it was a really, really cracking good show. And I did see Deep Purple too, but in one of the latest iterations when they had Steve Morse. Very sorry to hear about the death of his wife this week, and
I
he was the
know.
guitarist. And I saw them at Portsmouth. Must have been uh, back in the late '90s, I think it was, with Gillan
Yeah.
still singing for them.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. I mean, I didn't get to start going to really going to concerts until the 90s. I saw very little during the 80s, the 70s. I was too young to even care about it, you know, and the 80s, I think I saw maybe a total of six, ranging from that band Berlin to Iron Maiden.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, it's
quite a sweep. That's quite a sweep.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, I went to my first gig in 1974 when I was 16, and that was Roxy Music at the Rainbow Theatre in London.
Oh.
So that was a pretty good way to start. That was when they were still in their experimental stages. I think it was the Country Life tour. So yes. Brian Ferry was in his gauchos. That was his gaucho phase, I think it was. I kind of went off them a bit when he got Very Lounge Lizard. I just thought that their early albums were just so experimental, so exciting, so innovative when they had Eno playing. I think actually when I saw them, they actually had Eddie Jobson playing and John Wetton on bass.
Oh, wow.
So that was, you know, I just kind of tracked back to check out their tours and everything like that. And John Wetton was definitely the bass player on that particular gig that I saw. So that was something, well, having seen what's in your record collection, very, very profound, of course.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I got to see Wetton at the Los Angeles Frog Fest in 1997 when he had, I know the keyboardist, Martin Orford.
Oh, yes. He lives just down the road from here.
What's that?
He lives just down the road from here. We live in the same county. Yeah. He doesn't live too far away.
Yeah. The one thing I remember of that night is right after the concert was over, and across the street they had the hotel where I was staying, and I was just walking back, and all of a sudden I see him walking almost parallel, and you know, I just introduced myself, and that was about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. Next thing you know, the sun was rising. We were just talking mostly about his band IQ.
Yes. Yeah.
But yeah, it was it's kind of nice to see that Wetton, you know, because I posted many times on Facebook that he is one of, if not my favorite, my hero, you know, musical hero. I mean, he's every time I listen to him sing or him play the bass, it was like, you know, it was just perfect. And I got into him when Asia came out.
Yeah. Well, that first album, it's one of my defining albums in my life.
Oh, yeah. All right. It's up to you now. Number 2.
My turn. Well, this is another great favorite from 1979. Again, with a tremendous story behind it. And it's Spectral Mornings by Steve Hackett. And I believe Mr. Hackett is about to release his 30th solo album, which is The Circus and the Night Whale. And I believe that's coming out in the next 2 weeks. But this was his third solo album. He started with Voyage of the Acolyte, which was amazing. Then he did Please Don't Touch, which I was a little bit 50-50 about. That didn't quite hit the spot the way that I thought it might. But this one, I was absolutely sold, hook, line, and sinker. I think this is one of the most beautiful albums I've ever heard. And it just kind of paved the way for what was to come, to show his general kind of the themes that he uses in his songs, the way that he structures the songs so that he can really major on his extraordinary fluid guitar playing, his melodic guitar playing. I think probably he's my favorite guitarist of all time because of the way he plays. I'm not been so keen on him sort of reviving the Genesis songbook on the recent tours, because I would just rather go and see him doing his solo material, because there's enough there. But I think this is just such a beautiful album, starting with the incredible Every Day, which is one of the best openers of all time, and then finishing with Spectral Mornings, which is one of those instrumentals that seems to get overlooked in the sort of greatest instrumentals of all time charts and things like that. And in between, you've got beautiful songs like The Virgin and the Gypsy, The Red Flower of Takai, and then you've got the incredible, powerful, amazing clocks, The Angel of Mons, which with that drum solo at the end. And that was, I've seen that played live, and that is an amazing piece of work. That so, and I got to meet him on this tour as well when he played in a place called Hemel Hempstead, which just happened to be my birthplace. It's up in Hertfordshire, just above London. And I got to meet him after the show he did there, and we ended up talking about the authors. Who did we talk about? We talked about Thomas Hardy and D.H. Lawrence, who were two of our most prolific sort of Victorian writers. But he's an absolutely charming guy, and it's just lovely to see him going so strong after all these years.
Yeah, I mean, and he's the one that out of all of the people in Genesis that really leans more onto the progressive side of things. I mean, you know, obviously Phil went more pop, and and Tony and Mike, they kind of, well, Mike did the Mike and the Mechanics, you know, so he kind of went pop there, and Peter Gabriel went a different route, and so those, between the two of those guys, you know, Peter and Steve, those are the ones that I always look forward to if something's coming out from them or anything, you know, any kind of news. I like to read about them, and yeah, that's a good choice. I got into that because of Genesis, obviously. In the, this was all again in the early '90s. Just a big discovery about, I want to say about '92. I just start discovering all this music, because I went through a phase from about the mid '80s to about '91. It was all heavy metal, thrash metal, speed metal, all, you know, that's all I was listening to. And I was in a record store, and the manager got tired of me and this other guy playing that thrashy stuff all the time. And he goes, "I got something for you to listen to." And I said, "Okay." I said, it's heavy, and I think you're gonna like it. And he put on King Crimson Red, and I was sold from there. I mean, I was like going, "That's John Wetton playing?" I mean, I only knew him previously because of Asia, and I'm like going, "Okay," you know. So I told the manager, I said, "You might as well take that out of the CD player and put it aside, because I'm going to be buying that today." So yeah, it's amazing where you, even if you don't get the group, or you know, at the time that they are popular, I think as long as you get them, you know, I think you're good. I mean, all my selections that I'm going to be talking about, I didn't get them in 1979 because you know, at that point, music really wasn't important. It was just whatever was on my parents' car stereo, whatever, you know, the AM radio. That was it, you know.
Yeah.
So well, mine probably doesn't really need any kind of introduction. Pink Floyd, The Wall.
You beat me to it, Ron. You beat me to it.
This one, I found out about them when I saw the movie. I was working at a video store, and they had it in their, you know, the little concert section. I was like going, "Oh, this got kind of a trippy cover, you know, I'll check it out." And I was like going, wow, that was the at that point in my life one of the more bizarre films I have ever seen, and so I just hunted down the proper album and listened to it start to finish. I mean, I think I lost count of how many times I've listened to this album,
Hmm.
and it just stuck with me. Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
I do believe, even though they have quote unquote singles on this album, I do believe this is an album that you must listen to from start to finish. You
Hmm.
can't just
Hmm.
cherry pick the songs.
No.
And to me, Pink Floyd music always sounds good in headphones and when the lights are dim.
Of
You
course.
know,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you get transported to wherever they're singing. The storylines,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Mm.
think it's more enjoyable listening to music on headphones than
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
speakers.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I went with some friends recently to see to a local discovery stroke planetarium, where we saw the planetarium version of Dark Side of the Moon, when we all sat back
Oh,
in the seats and had it all project these incredible visuals over on the ceiling, and it was like tripping. It really was. And we were sort of got up and we sort of staggered out of our seats. And it was the most incredible experience because their music has that intensity, that kind
yes.
of that kind of astral dimension to it, if you like, that you can do things like that with their music. With the film, with The Wall, that was a completely different concept. I mean, with Gerald Scarf's amazing artwork, and then you've got Bob Geldof sort of as the protagonist in the film and everything like
Oh,
that. So
yeah.
it's a story that was just waiting to be told, like
Yeah. And
Pink Floyd, like Dark Side of the Moon was just waiting to be heard on the can, sort of the dead of night in the dark, you like.
right. Yeah.
They had those dynamics through sewed up through and through.
Back home in Los Angeles, there's a place called the Griffith Observatory, and they used to
Uh-huh,
have uh, something called Lazarium, and
uh-huh.
they would play a lot of the classic rock. Well, at that time it wasn't called classic rock, but
Yeah.
they would play Dark Side of the Moon and different other things, and you just sit back in the planetarium and you just watch the lasers going all over the place, and
Wow.
it was an experience.
Bet.
Uh,
Yeah.
I mean, I find me personally, I don't need to take any substances if I want to go to another. I just all I need to do is put music in the player, and the music takes me there. You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely.
but
Music that
so
music, that music that takes you on journeys is the best music of all.
oh yeah, and
Mm.
storytelling. I love the
Yeah.
storytelling aspect of it.
Mhm,
And that's something that's I think is lost today
mhm,
because basically when in caveman times when they finally figured out song, it was just basically telling the story of what happened that day or what
mm,
happened in the community,
mm,
and music was doing that in the 60s and 70s and partly into the 80s, and in the 90s it just
mm,
started. you know we went back to the almost like the 50s where we're talking about girls and cars again, and nowadays we're doing that. It's doing that again, at least in
mm,
the mainstream music. I
mhm.
mean, that's why I'm I like to listen to things that are as far from mainstream as possible because I want to listen to stories,
Yes. Yeah.
done
Yeah.
through music.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the one that comes to mind immediately when you mentioned that is Elias Hello by John Anderson. That to me is the ultimate story telling from a completely different dimension, a different world, and that was such a beautiful album.
Oh yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So is it my turn to pick now?
yes, Your
What have
turn.
I got
Number
up
three.
here? Right. Something a little bit different from 1979, but a very much an essential album, an essential band from 1979. It's the Police, Regatta de Blanc. And they kind of shook the world quite considerably over here, for starters. Because, I mean, we'd had punk for about 4 or 5 years, the makings of punk, and then these three blondes with an incredible energy, a completely different vibe, who kind of played off the new wave. They had the new wave attitude, they had the reggae um, sensibilities, and they looked brilliant as well. And they just kind of burst on the scene with these very, very fast and furious, vibrant songs, and just took the world by storm. And of course, they in themselves have got a bit of a proggy legacy, because Stuart Copeland was in Curved Air. He was the drummer with Curved Air and married Sonia Christina, the lead singer, the singer. And Andy Summers was briefly in Soft Machine, and he also appeared on the orchestral version of Tubular Bells and played with Kevin Ayers. So they had the progressive chops going there, and then they just added Sting, who was the master storyteller and frontman, and singing bass player, which seemed to be quite fashionable around that time, with Geddy Lee on the other side of on your side of the pond. And we all love them. Their energy, their kind of sensibility, their intelligence just really caught us all by surprise and with delight. And of course, on this album, you've got Walking on the Moon, but one of my favorites is The Bed's Too Big Without You, because I just love the vibe on that particular song.
Yeah.
And Bring on the Night as well. Well, all of them are great. I mean, the opener is Message in a Bottle, and I think everybody's sung that in karaoke at some stage.
Right. Well, I knew up until a few years ago, I knew all the hits that they played and the videos on MTV, and it wasn't until I think it was 1 or 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. I picked up that Police box set that had all the studio albums and then the bonus with all the odds and ends, and listening to the albums all the way through is like it's just amazes me that how the media tends to focus only on the hits, and it's like basically kind of a subliminal message. Just listen to the hits. Don't listen to the rest of the album. Just the hits. By the single of that. But when you listen to the albums in full, it's like a lot of the deep cuts are better than the hits, because they're basically they're not being I guess they're not being tied down by the record label to do their bidding. They're doing their own, and then to hear the bonus CD had stuff before the first album and that raw punk energy that they had, and how they refined it into multi styles. I thought that was amazing. And I think they get overlooked a lot because of people only know them from their hits.
Yes, yeah. They were a very pivotal band in this, I think, because they developed their style. They went from the punky reggae style, and then they went through the kind of Every Breath You Take style, and then they got really thoughtful, doing things like Invisible Sun towards the end, and Spirits in the Material World, which I thought were terrific songs. The more commercial end again, but they were always very, very thoughtful, because they were intelligent guys, and boy, did we know about it.
Right. Yeah.
But I think the problem was that you had three very big egos, or two very big egos, in Stuart Copeland and Sting, and they were always butting heads throughout the duration of the band.
Yeah. I watched videos with Stuart, and I could see how of a dominant type of person he is. And Sting, obviously very dominant. I think Andy just as long as he can play his guitar,
just went with the flow, basically, didn't he?
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of not really a great thing to say, because then you know, but he injected his style into the music too. Because I mean, I don't think they would have done it if they had a different guitar player.
Oh
I don't
no,
think it would have
no.
sound right. So it's just those three together, just created fantastic music.
Mm. Mm. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go with my next one, and we spoke about his band earlier, but it's Robert Fripp Exposure.
Uh-huh.
This is the fourth edition. I did have the first edition back in the early '90s, and I didn't know about a second edition. Then maybe 5 or 6 years ago, they had the third edition. My thing is this: is I really wish people would stop releasing things over and over. It's like have a definitive edition and leave it at that. If you find other gems in the closet, release those on a separate thing. Don't do it again. But this one, I mean, it has it has more of a link to the past and into the future.
Yes.
I mean, you had songs like Breathless, which kind of was like a more punkier King Crimson in a way. And I thought that I was so amazed that what's his name, Daryl Hall, worked with him. And then I recently watched a thing on YouTube where he had Daryl's house, and he had Robert Fripp over, and they played a couple of the songs, and in between the songs they have a little chat about kind of reminiscing about the old day, and that that Daryl and Robert knew each other since '74, and how I think Robert got a lot of his inspiration for this album is when he moved to New York, and I just liked, he got one song from Peter Gabriel, got Daryl Hall singing on some, Peter Hamill on some, and which I think that out of all the voices, I like the Peter Hamill and Robert's guitar. I think it kind of fits really well, especially on the more aggressive guitar playing that Robert can do. I did get to see King Crimson in the '94, and then again I think it was in 2000. And I made a mistake in 2000 of not bringing earplugs because my ears were ringing for weeks afterwards. My ex at the time, we went. I bought the tickets, and I said, "Are you sure you want to go? This is really not your kind of music." And she says, well, "Yeah, let's go. A night out." And because at the I still do, but I was using a cane. One of the ushers said, "Oh no, we have some handicapped seats up in front that you could sit." And I said, so I went from way in the back to way in the front up to the left-hand side. And I think that's where my ears got
pulverized.
Yeah, and it was a great show. I mean, but he's one of my favorite guitar players because of his experimentations.
Oh yes, yeah.
That's one of the things I like about his playing is like he thinks outside of the box.
Oh, totally. Yes. Yeah. Well, I have to say, Ron, one of the greatest concerts I ever went to, and I can still see it in my mind, is I went to see King Crimson on the Discipline tour in 1982, and they were playing a provincial town called Aylesbury, which was kind of like the centre of the universe in the UK around about that time, because
Right.
they had this very, very famous rock club called Friars. And any band that was any band played Friars. It was a kind of like a medium-sized hall, but it was the cachet around it. And
Right.
it was, I heard Discipline, and Discipline is my very, very favourite Crimson album. You know, I've kind of loved and hated Crimson over the years, but Discipline was my album. And that night, I was just, my mind melted. It was the heat of the room, but also the musicianship that night was just beyond belief. And
Yeah.
it was just a night I've never forgotten how I felt that night, and how my mind, I just felt so kind of taken away to a different world, you know, the world of Fripp,
Right.
Lou and Bruford and Levin that night. It was incredible.
Oh yeah. That's the one thing I like about that is that you get after you go to a concert, even if it's like an hour,
Yeah.
you feel like you just been exercised or something
Yeah.
like that. You know,
Yeah.
you feel cleansed afterwards.
Oh,
You
yes.
know,
Yeah.
and it's amazing. I mean, I was happy that I got to go see them. You know, it was
Mhm.
in Hollywood,
Yeah.
and it was.
Well,
I
not the
didn't like the
Hollywood
vent.
Bowl.
No, no, it was a place called the Weltern Theater,
Uh-huh. Yes.
and trying to find parking was in LA. Trying to find parking is, it's all I could say is good luck. You know, it's just
Goodness
so
me.
difficult.
Yes.
It's so
Yeah.
difficult, and then of course then you have to go to those the paid parking lots, and they tend to charge you a little bit more than they should, but
Mhm.
they can get away with it.
Mhm.
And but yeah, that was I got this about the same time that I got Red, so it's like
Mhm.
to hear 79 and Red was 74, so it's like 5 years what the changes that he's gone through, and
Mhm. Mhm.
how he played with Bowie
Yeah.
uh and Blondie, and
Yeah.
it was amazing. I mean, just stuff that usually prog musicians probably wouldn't do nowadays, is to go into a more mainstream band to play, but
Mm.
uh it's, it was back then. It's like who could do anything, you know.
Did he ever do anything with Talking Heads as well? Or am I
No, that
imagining?
was the only one was Baloo.
Oh, it
He
was
was.
okay. Yeah, because that would have been an interesting combination if Fripp had sort of got together with David Byrne et al. To play.
Oh yeah, that would have been an interesting band.
Yeah, wouldn't it? Wouldn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Is it my turn
All
now?
right, your turn now.
Well, talking of Hollywood and Los Angeles, my next album was actually recorded in Los Angeles, and it's Breakfast in America by Supertramp.
Oh yes.
And well, this is a very, very special album because I think of all the bands that came out of Britain in the 70s, I think this is one of the most quintessentially British bands because they had that kind of air of eccentricity about them too. And their very, very distinctive sound. And this is when they went transatlantic. They recorded this in Los Angeles, and they kind of picked up some of the American vibes with the opener Gone Hollywood. And then
Right.
you had that brilliant, I mean, their most popular song, of course, is the Logical song, but I think for everybody growing up, that the words that were being conveyed made total sense the way that we were all
Oh, yeah.
conditioned when we were young. And I mean, there were some fantastic songs on this album. Um, we've also got Goodbye Stranger. We've got, well, of course, Breakfast in America is the iconic song, and Take the Long Way Home. I mean, it's just one great track after another. And that is very, very distinctive. Well, it's an electric piano all the way through, which kind of
Right.
gives them their unique sounds. And I've got to say this, I only found this out last week, but I've actually got a family connection with this particular album because my sister-in-law Stella actually provided Rick Davis with the copy of the Swindon Advertiser, the local newspaper from where he came, which he's seen reading or rather pouring milk on the back cover of the album.
Oh, that's cool.
And she told me, my brother told me this week that she's very proud of the fact she supplied that newspaper for the album. So I had to put it out there. Thank you, Stella. But it's a brilliant album, and it was just kind of like the crowning glory to everything they'd done with Crime of the Century before that. But it was just a shame that Rick and Roger kind of didn't quite see eye to eye musically from kind of that point onwards, really.
Right, yeah, and it was almost like the next one that they did. I can't even remember that.
I can't remember.
It's all I remember is the album cover is the Tightrope.
Yeah.
And the song, "It's Raining Again."
Oh yes, you know? Yeah.
And I had that on cassette, and I was listening to that, and my mom really liked that song.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just kind of, it's always kind of interesting when a parent likes something you're playing, you know.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So I played it again for her, you know, and she said, you know, and she just absolutely loved that song. So,
yeah.
But I did, when I got that, then I found out, okay, there's more to this band. So I went backwards and got every single thing that they put out, with the exception of the first two albums, which I'm told is very different. It doesn't have that Supertramp sound. Were, I guess, they were trying to find themselves at that point.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, well, Crime of the Century was one of my kind of college albums as well. You know, we had Dreamer and You're Bloody Well Right sort of going on in the sixth form room most of the time while we were there. And so when they brought it all together with this album, it was very, very special. And yeah, great album. And with the transatlantic connection, like I said, that's even better. And it's beautifully produced anyway. It really has that quality sound to it.
Oh yeah, I you know, back in the cassette days, I had that one too, and just listened to that, and I forget which was the song that in one of my years in high school they used to have in the auditorium. They used to have I forgot what they call them, where you had to go into the auditorium like. And they would have either a talent show or the cheerleaders would be doing their thing. And one time the cheerleaders were doing a routine to school.
Oh yeah. Wow.
And I was like going, oh wow, this I mean, but this was in the 80s. They were still doing that, and I was like, it was kind of, so I knew of them, but I just didn't get to them until when that the album that escapes my name, the name, when that came out, I didn't get into it until then, and but yeah, great band, and that's a great album. I mean, that's on the top of almost everyone's list that considers themselves a music fan.
Yeah, but the thing about that album is that it sort of crossed over into the mainstream as well.
Yeah,
it wasn't just a kind of a prog album, but it was much loved by everybody in a much wider musical spheres.
Yeah, and I think they did it the right way, you know, where it's like retaining your who you are, but you know, kind of getting, you know, like you're saying, more refined, more, you know. And I mean, I think that's the right way of doing it, instead of like just diving right in and forgetting your past, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of those kind of bands. It's almost like it's like they're giving the middle finger to their fans,
Mm.
and it's like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like you can ease everybody in, you know, and to the point where it's like the new fans would want to go back and listen
Mm.
to the old stuff, and then
Yeah.
and the older fans would be okay. It may not be as, you know, progressive as
Mm.
it was, but it's certainly not pop as it
Yeah.
could be.
Mm.
You know.
Mm. Yeah.
All right. Well, this next one has a connection to the previous one, and it's UK Danger Money.
Okay. Right. Yep.
Um, I've again, this is a find. Another of my friends told me about this band UK, and he said John Wetton's in it. You know, you're gonna like it because it's just before he did Asia and right after he did King Crimson. I said, okay, you know, right there I was sold. So I got the two CDs and the live one, and you know, obviously I say the first CD has more jazz leanings, and the second CD has more rock leanings.
Mm-hmm.
And I like them both, but I tend to listen to this one more.
Yeah. Does that still have Eddie? That has Eddie Jobson on it as well, does it?
Yeah, this is where they became the three piece.
Yeah.
With Terry Bozzio on drums.
Yeah.
And I appreciate his playing. I mean, I don't think of him as better or worse than Bruford.
Mm-hmm.
I think different. They're completely different people.
Yes.
You know, again,
Definitely.
Bruford leans more towards a jazz style of playing, and Terrio's a more rock drummer. And this is the one that it had the two hits off there. Well, if you could call them hits, Rendezvous 602 and Nothing to Lose.
Oh, great. Yes.
But in between all that, you know, you got the title cut, and you got the ending 13-minute Carrying No Cross that kind of reminds me of, like, it could be almost a sibling to Starless.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I read too that at one time, John Wetton was trying to get, before Alan Holdsworth came in, they were trying to get Robert Fripp to be in it. And he says, if I do that, people are going to think this is King Crimson, and I don't want to do that. You know, he was tired of King Crimson at that point, you know, in the mid to late 70s. But this is a great album. I love listening to it. And then when they put out they did the remasters, the anniversary edition a few years back. It's like it sounds so much better. I mean, I believe they were on EG Records, and it had kind of a muddy sound. But here it's just so crisp and pristine sounding. And it kind of when they remaster these things the right way, it makes it as if you listen to the album for the first time. And that's a great one. I know there's a lot of people that prefer the first album, and that's great because that's a great album. And then there's people that prefer this one, and this is a great album. So it's like, but I think you need to listen to them both and make up your own mind. Don't go by what other people say. But I love them both. It's just I tend to play Danger Money more than the debut.
Brilliant. So yes, I can see a John Wetton theme is sort of occurring, or King Crimson is occurring, just very much like there could be a theme recurring through my albums, because my last choice is A Curious Feeling by Tony Banks.
Oh yes.
So we're back to the Genesis link again. But I remember this album so much because I remember at the time I was 21 years old and I was working as a reporter on a local paper up in the home counties of England, just above London. And I was living in a bedsit in a shared house, and I had a load of bedsit albums, and this was one of my favourite albums that I used to play on my record player because I just love this album. I loved the kind of the whole kind of watery feeling to it. It had this kind of this flow, the way that it just all flows together. And Tony, the thing I like about Tony Banks is that unlike his his prog compadres, Keith Emerson and Rick Wakeman, Tony Blanks was one of the most unflashy players. He would rather
Right.
probably would have wanted to play as far out of the spotlight as possible. He was just a player's player, and I know
Right.
this from what some people told me. And he didn't want any of that razzmatazz that the other two went in for. But yet,
Right.
without Genesis, they would never have had their sound, would they? With the beauty of his playing, the fluidity, the classical um, feeling that he injected throughout their music. And this album to me is quite remarkable because there are only three musicians on it. There's Tony, who just plays just about everything. Chester Thompson on drums, who was of course the Genesis drummer around about then, and this remarkable singer called Kim Beacon, who sadly is no longer with us. He died quite a long time ago, but he's got such an incredibly pure but slightly raspy voice, and it's so different to that of Collins and Gabriel that I think he must have chosen him deliberately to deliver his songs so that there could be no comparison between the two. And the songs on here are just beautiful. And I listened to it again this afternoon. I've been doing my homework and I played it again.
Right.
And it really moved me to hear some of the pieces on here, like Somebody Else's Dream, which is just, it is very Genesis, but it's just this. Beacon's voice is just so out there. It's so majestic.
Right.
And I just love it. I think it's a brilliant, brilliant album.
And is that one that you were holding up? That's that reissued in the kind of like
That's the reissue. That's a more recent version. Yeah, yeah.
That's
You
the
got
one that I got.
It is.
I got that one, and when it came out, and I never heard it before that time.
You hadn't?
And
okay.
No, so that was kind of cool. That again here, it was like he was kind of following in the progressive tradition, but going his own way.
Yeah, yeah.
Instead of going completely pop, you know. Which I don't blame Collins for doing that because he had that kind of a voice that.
Oh yes, yeah.
And my only thing is that I wish he didn't bring that stuff back into Genesis. He should have kept that
separately. Yeah, to his solo.
You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's another great one. You know, I
thank you.
I thoroughly enjoy that one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And my final album is Eloy. Oh, it's not going to show it because it's green. Silent Cries and Mighty Echoes. Yeah, because it's green, so the green screen is going to.
Oh right. Yeah, I can. Is that a massive mannequin's head on the front? What's on the front of it?
It's a head, and it goes keeping. It's like a flying head almost.
Oh right, okay.
And this one, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the one that they put out in '77 called Ocean, because it had a very there's a lot of mythology going into the storytelling. And like I was talking with a friend of mine about the band, people always are turned off by the vocals, Frank's vocals, because he has a very strong German accent.
Okay.
And yes. I think it adds to the music. Me personally, I mean, it's that one of those rare instances where that kind of vocals actually is a plus. And I got into these guys in the 90s. I went to a local small record store, and the guy was playing Ocean over
Mm-hmm.
the loudspeaker, and I asked him what that is, and he told me, and I said, "Well, I'd like to get that if it's available." And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Is there another one of theirs?" And he showed me this one, Silent Cries and Mighty Echoes. Um, Now it has the proper album, and then it has some bonus tracks. And I was trying to find some information about the bonus tracks because one of the songs is a single off of the next album that came out in '80.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was Time to Turn, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
but or Planets, one of the two, and then a non-album track on it. So it's like, but this is the one of these bands. If you like Pink Floyd, just the vibe that Pink Floyd gives off, they
Mm-hmm.
give off a similar vibe. I mean, sometimes they were kind of parallel to what Pink Floyd was doing at the time in the '70s, and sometimes they were late. Like in this one, there's a kind of some guitar sounds that remind me of stuff off of Animals,
Mm-hmm.
and but it's great. It's great. They were still in their quote unquote space rock uh, era, and but you can hear they were starting to get a little bit more heavier on this one, and I think it was basically what was to come because in the '80s they streamlined it down, and it was it had like it sounded like the '80s, and but it was more they added in more of a hard rock element to it, and still having progressive, but there was more hard rock into it. But they just recently put out one called uh, now I can't even think of the title, but it was kind of like a nod to things that they did before, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if they're going to continue after it. They don't do much touring
Mm-hmm.
because unfortunately their fan base really I don't think is as big
Mm-hmm.
for them to do it. I mean, if they probably do anything, they probably stick to doing stuff around Germany.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
but a great band. I mean,
They're just another band that kind of passed me by. I've heard of them and I've heard odd odd bits and pieces of them, but they haven't really kind of entered my mainstream. But maybe that will
right.
change.
I think that I mean when I found out about them, it was like, oh my god. I mean, it just even their drum sound back in the early part of the '70s,
Mm.
it didn't really sound like the drum sounds of that era, because it was very at times it was very crisp and very punchy.
Yeah, yeah.
And I mean, it wasn't as intricate as some drummers, but it just had kind of a very modern vibe to it, even back
Mm-hmm.
in the early times.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my final one.
Yeah, excellent.
And I mean, I mean, there's so many more out there that
Yeah,
for people to explore. I mean,
of course.
it's as easy as typing in your Google 1979 albums,
Mm-hmm.
and then if you want to get more prog albums, just add the word prog in there. You want rock albums, etc.
Yeah.
That's how I can't remember on my collection what year things are, so I use that Google thing as my reference
Yes.
point to find out. Oh, okay, I
Yeah.
do have that an album from
Yeah.
1979.
Yeah.
From that band.
Yeah. Well, I can't believe it was 45 years ago. I mean, like reading that next month is the 45th anniversary of when Breakfast in America came out. And I just remember everything in real time. You know, I
Right.
was 21 and I was kind of in the maelstrom of all the music roundabout then. And I cannot believe it's 45 years ago that this amazing music was being made. And it lives on. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, and it doesn't really sound like it's 45 years old.
Oh, it doesn't. It doesn't.
You know, because you notice that some stuff that come from the 70s, it sounds very dated, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
because, you know, I mean, there's bands that they stick with what they know, and there's other bands
Mm.
that like to experiment,
Yeah.
you know, not only with with music, but they experiment with recording and everything like
Mm.
that.
Hmm.
Um, you know, so it's just amazing. Um, I mean, speaking of the '70s stuff, I picked this puppy up.
Oh, goodness me. Brilliant. Yeah,
Yeah,
I saw them about 18 months ago. Goodness me. They were a veritable hit machine and made some incredible albums too.
oh yes, yeah, and I got that at a really good price,
Hmm.
and I was like, going, I can't not miss it. I have to buy it, even though I own most of the CDs
Hmm.
beforehand.
Yeah.
But I just wanted a more, how do you say, a more complete
Yes.
collection.
Hmm.
I mean, even though they go to '92, there was an album in '95, and then I saw somewhere they had one out in 2006.
Hmm.
Because I think there's only one original member.
Yeah, Graham Gouldman.
Yes. Um, yeah, I think I had something from him, a solo thing that he did
Mm. Mm.
in the early 2000s, because
Yeah.
I got it out of the blue when I used to do CD reviews,
Hmm.
and I got the thing out of the blue. And I had no idea who it was, and then I read the bio sheet, and I go, "Oh, okay, I know the band." So it. I used to do CD reviews from 2001 up until 2016,
Uh-huh.
and then I took a very big break, and thanks to COVID, this show happened.
Oh.
Because everybody, all the bands that I got to interview in 2020, they weren't doing anything,
Hmm.
so they basically said, "Why not? Let's do it." I could, you know, kind of keep them on everybody's radar,
Mm.
you know,
Mm.
until the thing blew over. And I'm still getting a lot of uh, new and old bands that are coming on. That whenever they put out an album, I let them use this as a platform
Mm.
to
Hmm.
talk
Yeah,
to their
great.
people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, and not next week, but on the 27th. Yeah, the 27th. You know, I have Galahad coming on.
You have Galahad coming on? They're
Yeah,
very good friends of mine.
yeah. Okay, I'll tell them that you said.
Oh, well, they know who I am. And yeah, they're playing in Holland tonight. They're playing at the Border Eye. They're playing at a very, very famous venue tonight called the Border Eye in Holland. And yeah, I saw them just before Christmas in Southampton, and they were fantastic. Their energy, their new album is fantastic.
Oh yes. Oh yeah. I when I got I've been kind of every time they put out something, I would get it.
Mm.
I did interview them last year um, for the album before,
Yes,
and you know,
the last great
Stu-
adventurer, wasn't it?
yes, yeah,
That's it, about Stuart's dad.
yeah, and Stuart's uh, very friendly. We were talking he kind of explained a little bit about the new album,
Yeah.
in private. And I was
Yes.
like going,
Yeah.
I think that I told him, I said, this is, it's good that you're using music as,
Mm.
uh, as a therapy
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
because, and also too is someone else out there that has the same experience
Yes. Yeah.
and doesn't understand what's going on
Mm.
when they listen to prog music and they listen to this, they'll get a better understanding.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I really enjoy it. I mean, to me, it's fun just to talk to people.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And but well, we made it just a little bit
We.
past an hour.
I know we've done very well. Just the
Yeah,
two of us, Ron. Yes. Yeah.
yeah.
Tell. Did you still go to gigs at all?
I have not gone to anything since 2012.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh,
Oh dear.
Most of it is the location I'm in. I'm in
Mm.
what I
Yeah.
kind of call a music wasteland.
Oh goodness.
Uh, the
Mm-hmm.
closest anything comes up this way is Boston,
Mm. Mm.
and that's a 6 hour drive, and I'm I don't think I can handle 6 hour
No.
drive.
No.
But uh, no, the last one was Rossfest in 2012. I went
Uh-huh.
to, and that was a great show. I enjoyed not only watching the bands, but then how the bands they mingle with everybody. So it's not like they're way up here and
Mm.
you're down here.
Mm.
You're on the same level with them,
Yeah.
and how
Yeah.
you know. And I know a lot of them love to hear that that people love their work,
Mm. Mm.
and if they have like this is a great album, they like hearing that because then that gives them motivation
Of
to
course.
continue.
Of course. Mhm.
But
Yeah, yeah. Well, we're very lucky because we've got a very, very good venue about a 25-minute drive from here in Southampton, which is very one of the most southerly cities in the country. And there's a very, very good venue there. And I saw the Beatrix Players there on Sunday night. And amongst their ranks was John Hackett, Steve Hackett's brother, who was playing flute.
oh wow,
So it's all gone full circle as well. So it was nice to catch up with him again because I
yeah,
interviewed
we
him.
have we have a brand new venue downtown
Uh-huh.
that at first I thought it was just a movie theater where they have
Mm.
selections of movies you can
Mm.
watch. But then
Yeah.
I went to their website and they're doing rock shows, and I'm like going, well, I have a friend of mine. She has a band called Dark Beauty, and they're in New Hampshire, but they
Mm.
want to play some more shows, but they want to kind of stay close to home. And I told them, well, you come up my way, there's this place, and I gave them the link. I said, your band will have more of a chance playing here because they have a metal, they're kind of a progressive gothic metal, so
Mm.
they would have more of a chance to get an audience than let's say a traditional prog band, because up here is mostly country,
Mm-hmm.
rap, and metal.
Uh-huh.
So uh, yeah, it's like I said, it's kind of a wasteland up here.
Mm. Oh, what a shame. Mm.
Yeah, but I would have loved to have a place 25 minutes away.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You
What
know,
what's what's the US prog scene like at the moment? Have you got any new bands up and coming? Maybe.
um, no, there's one that I found out through a band that I recently interviewed. Um, it's called Earthside, and they're very they kind of progressive metal,
Yeah.
that gent style,
Hmm.
world music, kind of all put together, and then a string section and everything. And if you go and check out on YouTube, they have
Mm.
a few videos, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that it's like it sounds amazing. I mean,
Mm.
and they're from Connecticut,
Oh, not too far
so
away then.
no, no. So I like when bands, up and coming bands, they take what came from before them,
Mhm.
but then they add something that's now to it,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and that's what I like when
Mm.
it's like when they actually progress.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Quite agree. Quite agree.
Uh, I want to thank you for
Oh,
coming on, and you're always welcome to come back.
thank you, Ron. Thank you. It's been a
And
pleasure. And it's been absolutely lovely talking to you and sharing thoughts about the magical music of 1979.
yes,
It's taken me right back to my formative years, just remembering all this fabulous music that's coming out then.
oh yeah, yeah.
Mm.
A lot of people, when I was mentioning that it was going to be 1979, they go, not much came out. I go, well, you got to really look.
Mm.
There's more came out than you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well,
you
as
know,
we've proved tonight, I think.
oh
Or,
yes,
or
I
it's
mean,
tonight here, it's still today where you are.
right.
It's past
But
2 o'clock. It's just after 9 o'clock here.
oh yeah, yeah, and it's just after 4.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well,
Okay.
again, thank you so much for joining me,
You're very welcome. And
and
thank you too for inviting me.
you're welcome. And I'll be keeping in touch with you.
Please do, Ron. I look forward to hearing from you.
Okay, take it easy.
Take care. Take care.
All right. All right.
Bye.